Now, I'm not sure about how much you know about Hong Kong. I think some of you probably know a great deal, but then some of you may not know that much. So I think I'll talk in more general terms about Hong Kong and China. And I see that the topic is Hong Kong's impact on China and vice versa. And I will take China to mean China, not the People's Republic of China. Because I think historically Hong Kong and China have had many periods of interaction, and you can look at many levels of interaction between these two entities. On one level, you see that Sun Yat-sen, who was deemed the father of modern China, I think, was a wanted person in the Ching dynasty, and he found refuge in Hong Kong. In fact, Hong Kong at that time, I think, was considered to be a base for subversion against the mainland. Many revolutionaries, that is, people who wanted to overthrow the dynasty, were in Hong Kong, and actually this extended to revolutionaries from other countries as well, including the Philippines. So Hong Kong has historically had that role, and then Hong Kong also was a safety valve as far as China was concerned. Whenever there was a big political upheaval in China, say the Taiping Rebellion, lots of people from the mainland came to Hong Kong. And they would wait it out, and then when things quieted down, they would return to the mainland. And of course, during the civil war between the communists and the nationalists, and when the PRC was proclaimed, almost a couple of million people came to Hong Kong. At the end of the Second World War, Hong Kong had a population of 600,000. By the early 50s, it was 2.5 million. So you can see how many people came to Hong Kong from the mainland. And they came to Hong Kong not to look for a better life primarily, but because they wanted to escape the civil strife. And the people who came after 1949 wanted to escape from communist rule. So I think to skip a little bit to the present, the Chinese government, as you know, wants Hong Kong to have national education, which in the mainland would be called patriotic education. Teach people to be patriotic. I think that's going to be very difficult in Hong Kong because of the population. The population consists of people who fled communism and their children and grandchildren. China resorts to patriotic education. For instance, after the Tibet uprising, they had patriotic education in Tibet, especially for monks and nuns. I don't know how effective that is. They're saying it's been very effective. I have my doubts. But I think it's not going to be very effective in Hong Kong either. So Hong Kong has always been a base for subversion against mainland because Hong Kong was under foreign rule, under British rule. But then 1949 came. The People's Liberation Army could have marched in and taken over Hong Kong, but they didn't. They stopped at the Hong Kong border. Why? Because I think the communists had the vision to see that Hong Kong was going to be useful to them under British administration. And so the People's Liberation Army stopped at the Hong Kong border, and you can see how, looking back, you can see how it was very wise of the Communist Party to have done that because Hong Kong has been so useful to China since then. The very next year, 1950, the Korean War broke out, an embargo was placed on China, and what happened? Hong Kong became a channel for, well, ostensibly medical supplies to the mainland, but I think the stuff that was smuggled through consisted of a lot more than just medical supplies. And China acknowledged this a few years ago when a leading Hong Kong industrialist, Henry Fok, died. And he was praised for being a patriotic businessman, and he was praised openly for having smuggled stuff into China during the Korean War. So Hong Kong was very useful to China at that time, and in the 50s, 60s, 70s, up to the 80s, when China was isolated, Hong Kong was China's window on the rest of the world. I know the rest of the world thought of Hong Kong as being their window into China, but actually Hong Kong was China's window onto the rest of the world. And China badly needed foreign exchange, and a vast amount of foreign exchange went into China from Hong Kong. This was largely by way of remittances by family members, but not just by family members who were in Hong Kong, but also by family members who were in the US and elsewhere. My mother, for instance, sent money regularly to her brother in Shanghai. And of course, there was no trade between the US and China, so it all had to be done through Hong Kong. And then after 1978, when China opened up to very gradually to foreign investment and trade, Hong Kong was the first to jump in. Hong Kong manufacturers moved their factories across the border to take advantage of the cheaper land and labor. And then when China needed capital, they came into Hong Kong and made use of the Hong Kong stock market. And you heard that from Rana Kali earlier. I think in the last 10 years, over $200 billion US was raised in the Hong Kong stock market. So Hong Kong has been very useful, but on a different level. One reason why the communists did not take Hong Kong in 1949 was because they had their eye fixed on Taiwan. They realized that they could take Hong Kong anytime. The British could not resist. But Taiwan was by far the more important body that they wanted to take. And Hong Kong could be useful in that because you could have meetings in Hong Kong between representatives from the mainland and Taiwan, and nobody would be the wiser. And that is why the 1992 consensus, which both sides now talk about, that was a meeting held in Hong Kong. Now, I was living in Hong Kong then. I had no idea this meeting was going on between representatives of Taiwan and the mainland. And they agreed that there was one China and disagreed as to what one China meant. So Taiwan could say one China means the Republic of China, and the mainland could say one China means the People's Republic of China. But this is all because Hong Kong was separate from the mainland. This could never have happened if Hong Kong was part of the mainland. Now, I think I have a couple of minutes left. After the Hanover, the original idea was that Hong Kong would have a high degree of autonomy, and I think that the Chinese government was serious about this. They trusted C.H. Tung, the first chief executive, to run Hong Kong properly, and they tried not to interfere. I can cite a number of things that they did. They dispensed with all their Hong Kong affairs advisors. They stopped inviting the mainland political party every year to China. The invitations were extended every year, 92, 93, up to 97. Then they stopped because Hong Kong was autonomous. Then 2003 came. There's this huge demonstration of over 500,000 people. And the Chinese government realized that C.H. Tung was not running Hong Kong properly. So then they decided they needed to be more involved. And so they started to invite the DAB to Beijing again on an annual basis. And 1998, China had said that Hong Kong members of the National People's Congress and Hong Kong members of the Chinese political CPPCC, Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference, would play no role in Hong Kong. Now it's been totally reversed. Now everybody appointed by China to these bodies get political influence in Hong Kong. And there is an agreement between the Hong Kong government and the central government's liaison office. This was published in the communist newspaper Wen Hui Bao and subsequently denied by both the liaison office and the Hong Kong government. Very curious, but of course it's happening. So I'm sure that report was accurate. Now, in the run-up to 1997, in order to create confidence in the future, the Chinese government repeatedly said that the pace of democratization in Hong Kong would be determined by Hong Kong people. And I can cite you names and dates. There was the director of the Hong Kong Macau Affairs Office said so in a quotation on the front page of the People's Daily. And then the Foreign Ministry said so in another quotation in the China Daily, that China would not interfere. Hong Kong could determine this on its own when the entire legislature could be popularly elected. Now, China reneged on these promises in 2003. Then I mentioned that China now wants Hong Kong to have patriotic education, or what they call national education. This is contrary to the Basic Law. And you've heard that the Basic Law is Hong Kong's constitution, promulgated and drafted by the National People's Congress. Now, I just happen to have a copy of the Basic Law in my pocket. And there is okay, Chapter 6, Article 136. On the basis of the previous educational system, meaning the British colonial system, the government of the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region shall, on its own, formulate policies on the development and improvement of education, including policies targeting the educational system and its administration, language of instruction, allocation of funds, examination system, system of academic awards, and the recognition of educational qualifications. It's very clear. Hong Kong shall on its own do this. And now what's happened? The central government is telling Hong Kong to do this, and an official from the central government's liaison office in Hong Kong has come out to say, well, if Hong Kong doesn't listen to the central government, how can it be national education? Like, it's not national if we're not listening to the national leadership. I think that it's undoubtedly the case that the autonomy that was meant for Hong Kong in 1997 has been shrinking over the years. I think to a large extent, one country, two systems still works in practice, but the shrinkage of the autonomy is occurring, and I hope that it, I don't see how it can be reversed. I hope it can be stopped. But Hong Kong continues to play the role of a subversive power, I think. Now there are tens of millions of tourists from the mainland who come to Hong Kong. They outnumber tourists from all around the world. And when they come to Hong Kong, they read Hong Kong newspapers, watch Hong Kong television, buy books and magazines that are banned in the mainland. And they take these back to the mainland with them. Also, in Guangdong province, you can watch Hong Kong television. And when Donald Tsang ran for chief executive in 2007, there was a televised debate with Alan Leung, who was running against him, and this could be watched in Guangdong. Similarly, last year, Donald Tsang had another debate of Audrey Yu that was televised and could be watched in Guangdong. And I think that people in the mainland must be thinking, why is it that people in Hong Kong can do these things and we can't? And actually, every year, as you probably know, to mark June 4th, there is a candlelight vigil in Victoria Park, and mainlanders go to these things. They come to Hong Kong, and they not only read the newspapers, they actually go take part in demonstrations. So I think that Hong Kong has an impact on the mainland, and that impact continues today. And I'm sure that the PRC would like to limit that impact to the greatest extent possible. But I don't think they can do this, because as more and more people come, as the information, free flow of information continues, the impact on the mainland is going to be greater. Thank you.